Listener discretion is advised. Before diving into today's topic, I want to offer a quick disclaimer. The show discusses sensitive topics that may evoke strong emotional responses. It's unsuitable for children, and I encourage you to prioritize your mental health and emotional well-being while listening. If at any point you feel uncomfortable or need to turn this off, please do so. Remember, it's okay to take breaks and seek support. I'll pause now for about 15 seconds so you have a chance to turn this off if you need to. Welcome to Coping with Ghosting, the podcast that provides hope, healing, and understanding for anyone who has been ghosted. I'm your host, Gretta, and I'm here with Jocelyn Fitzgerald, art therapist and EMDR consultant based in Vancouver, Washington. We're going to be discussing self-harm. And Jocelyn is passionate about empowering individuals to live authentically, connectedly, and creatively, combining board certified art therapy with traditional talk therapy and EMDR. She helps individuals struggling with depression, anxiety, and self-harming behaviors find solution and lasting healing. Beyond therapy, Jocelyn has co-authored a best-selling children's book promoting mindfulness, co-edited a textbook on EMDR and creative art therapies, and offers a range of colorful therapy tools, which I love. They're on her website. You could go check them out. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jocelyn.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and talk about this topic. It's so important to be talking about.
Yeah, it's a heavy one. It's a hard one. So I'm really glad we connected and that we're doing this. It's so important. And I would just like to begin with some examples of self-harm. Like, what is self-harm?
Yeah. So one of the things that's important to know is that self-harm is not a form, it's not a suicide attempt. It's a form of people are wanting to feel better. It's a maladaptive coping skill that needs to be modified and changed. But it can range. It's got a spectrum, from things as little as like people digging their nails into their hands really hard. Um, I've worked with kids that have used erasers to burn themselves, to using sharp objects to cut, oftentimes cutting in places that are hidden, like on the thighs or arms. Um, and yeah, it can go all across the range from really mild injuries to more severe injuries. And like I said, it's not an attempt to kill them to create suicide, but it can be dangerous in that there can be infections and then there can be accidents where people do um, cut too far and then it can lead to a suicide or to an
Yeah.
accidental death. Yeah.
Oof. Yeah. I have an episode on one form of self-harm. It's called Body Image, Eating Disorders, and Ghosting with Dr. Michelle Jensen. And I'll put a link to that in my show notes for anybody who's struggling maybe with an eating disorder. Yeah. Like listeners who are self-harming may feel like they're alone, but they're not. Can you please tell us why somebody may choose self-harm after being ghosted?
Yeah, yeah. And just to comment on what you said about the numbers, there are a lot of, usually it starts younger adolescents and goes into 20s and sometimes even 30s and 40s. And it is with male, female, non-binary across the board. We see it. Um, so why it would happen with ghosting, I think a big part of being ghosted is that you lose control of a situation. You're no longer able to have that relationship. And with self-harming behavior, you have full control of what's happening to your body. You get to play out on your body. You get to be the perpetrator and the victim and have your skin be that the ground that it happens on. Um, so it gives you a sense of control. And in that act, it also can act as a distraction from those thoughts, especially ruminating thoughts. It can take you off of those ruminations and make you feel the physical sensation in your body. It can create endorphins, which can help people to feel better. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of reasons why they might self-harm after being ghosted or feeling abandoned, rejected by somebody they care about.
Mm. Yeah. How can somebody who's self-harming cultivate compassion for themselves and stop beating themselves up for what they're doing? Like, for example, I used to bite my nails and I felt really ashamed of that. And I know now that nail biting is a form of self-harm, but just feeling like completely embarrassed about it was unhelpful.
Yeah. So I think having that first level of self-awareness, like, oh, this is happening again. I'm having this urge, this desire, and then recognizing the consequences of it. Like, this isn't actually helping me to get better. This is like kind of an addiction, that feels like it's filling a hole or a void, but it's not actually helping us to grow and to heal. Um, so like feeling the urge and not giving into that urge can be really important. Yeah, so recognizing it, being mindful, taking some deep breaths, or recognizing there's alternatives to self-harming, and in the beginning phases with clients, I would help to create scaffolding so that they would know there's alternatives. Sometimes in the beginning, we will say like you can do things like you can draw with a red marker on your skin if you want to see that. You can hold a
Mhm.
piece of ice to feel the cold sensation, which doesn't feel good, but it also takes you out of those ruminating thoughts and has you focusing on your hand or wherever you're holding that ice. Sometimes people will put a rubber band and snap it to feel something.
Mm.
I would like, I always like to have my clients move away from those things that are hurting them and to move into things that are more helpful and not harming physically to them, like art
Mhm.
therapy. I love
Mhm.
using EMDR with this population. I wrote my whole thesis in grad school on using stained glass windows, creating stained glass windows instead of self-harming. So they were taking glass and they were cutting the glass and then taking these broken pieces and putting them back together to create this metaphor of something whole and beautiful and new. And all the kids I worked with for my thesis all stopped self-harming. They all really turned to the arts and loved this experience and using, all the five senses. You're smelling it, you're feeling it, you're hearing the sounds. Um, so anything we can do, I feel like oftentimes, like with teens, we're like, you just need to stop doing that. That's not okay. You're gonna have
Mhm.
scars. This isn't safe. But they're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, tell me what to do instead.
Mhm.
And that's where having somebody that you trust that you can talk to, a friend or a therapist, if you can find a therapist, that's great. If not, just turning to art or the arts in general. For some kids, like having music or playing music can feel really good. I mean, I feel like art therapy, I really use in a broad way. It can be like baking a cake or knitting or, drumming. It can be all sorts of things that just kind of, there's also the element of distraction. So, kind of distracting when the urge is strongest and noticing there's different things you can do. And sometimes just having a list of things.
Mhm.
Okay, these are the top 5 things that I like to do, and having that written down or having images, because
Mhm.
when we get in that amygdala of that fight or flight response, sometimes it shuts
Mhm.
off our frontal cortex, and we have a
Mm.
hard time thinking of ideas like,
Mhm.
oh, I actually can call my friend I have on speed dial, or I can paint a beautiful mandala, or I can color in my coloring book, or I can listen to my favorite music. Having that listed for you when you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed or after being ghosted can be really supportive.
Wow, you just said so many brilliant things. Thank you for all of those. And some of the things I just took some notes down, like, okay, the rubber band. So you're talking about like putting a rubber band on your wrist and kind of snapping it every time you feel the urge to do something that's harmful to yourself. So this
Yes,
is an alternative substitution.
right. Not one that I
Um,
want for very long, but it's kind of like that in between. Like we're still learning the scaffolding, we're still building that support. That
okay.
can be something you do in the interim of building other tools and techniques. Yeah.
Okay. And then getting some ice and holding it.
Mhm.
How long should we hold the ice for?
Yeah, so that would just depend. Sometimes you can just hold it for a few seconds and then you can let it go. Some people will hold it until it melts and then it just melts. Doesn't really cause any damage to your skin,
Mhm.
but it doesn't feel good. Like if you hold it to it completely melts, it is uncomfortable.
Okay. And then, so having a list, so then writing the list and just having everything that kind of brings you joy or alternative behaviors to substitute. Okay, I love this because this is like completely actionable and doable. And honestly, like whether you self-harm or not, having a list of things to do, like that will kind of lift you up, like calling the friend and listening to great music, like all of that stuff is just going to bring you more joy. So I love all of these things. And then you also mentioned EMDR. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit more about that? What does EMDR mean? How can listeners experience it?
Yeah, so EMDR is this amazing technique. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a mouthful. But basically, what it is a trauma technique. It's the number one trauma technique right now, I think, in the world. It's the most researched, um, right there with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. But basically, what it is a trauma technique in that you bring up the trauma. So, however, maybe getting ghosted was your target that you're going to work on, and you ask questions around it. What's your negative belief about yourself? I'm not good enough, or I'm always going to be alone, or maybe I deserved this. And then you bring up, what are the feelings? I'm ashamed, I feel rejected, I'm angry and sad. And then, what do you feel in your body? Oh, my stomach hurts, like my throat feels tight when I think about it.
Yeah.
You bring it, it's kind of like you're ringing the bell again of the trauma in a safe way. And then you do these bilateral eye movements at a pretty rapid pace. You can also do bilateral tapping. I have these little things that vibrate back and forth, the little paddles that people can hold in their hands. Or you can do your own butterfly hug, tapping back and forth on your chest. And then you check in. After about a minute, you check in with the client. What do you notice now? Oh, whatever comes up for them is fine. Sometimes it's like nothing's changed, or sometimes it's like I feel a little bit worse, and you keep going. And then usually what happens is it brings that intensity level down, and you start to feel better. And you check in with this, what we call the subjective units of distress, 0 to 10. How intense is it? And you kind of can watch that body affect, the emotions, the suds. So it all comes down, and then you do a few other things, and then it really can help to desensitize and to reprocess that trauma that's gotten stuck in the brain. We talked a little bit about that rumination that can happen with ghosting,
Yeah.
where thoughts can get stuck. I should have done something different. I should have said something different.
Mm.
EMDR can help you get off of that kind of like neural pathway where you're just stuck on that train of ruminating on those negative thoughts.
Yeah, I love EMDR. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
magic. EMDR equals magic to me.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. I love it too. The thought is that a little bit, one of the theories is that, when we're in that REM sleep, our eyes are moving back and forth rapidly and our brain is processing through the trauma. So it's
Mhm.
kind of recreating that experience again.
Mm,
There's
mhm.
also, if I can just share one other thing, there's a technique called
Yeah.
brain spotting, which is an offshoot of EMDR, which is amazing too for trauma. And I'm learning about this technique around addiction. And you have two spots where you actually hold your eye position. One
Mhm.
is the spot where you have the urge to do whatever the behavior is that you want to change. And the other spot is the consequence, like I kind of talked about at the beginning. When you notice those two, what's the
Yeah.
urge? Where is the urge coming up for you? And then what's the consequence? So that's
Yeah.
another technique that I think. So I think a lot of people like can talk about their ghosting experience and can be like, I know it's over and I know I didn't do anything wrong and I know whatever. I know all these things rationally, but I still feel so bad inside. And I'm still getting triggered when I go here or when I think about this or when I hear this song. So it's like EMDR, brain spotting, they go deep into the brain and they help to reprocess that trauma.
Mhm.
Where talk therapy is awesome and great for looking at patterns and changing things, but sometimes we need to go deeper into the brain to recreate that new pathway. And so EMDR, brain spotting are two amazing techniques to help with that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm so grateful that you brought that up.
Yeah. I love them
Such a
both.
cool one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so it seems like there's a lot of different resources available. I know that not everyone is ready to go and get help like from another person. So like, and I know you gave a whole list of alternatives like substitutions, but if
Mhm.
somebody is like not really ready to give this behavior up and start substituting, is there anything you would want to say to them if they're not going to go to therapy or anything?
Mm. Oh, I would just want to say, like, there are alternative ways to feel your feelings. Um, I would say that you're going to get through it. You're going to feel better. That time really does help heal. And
Yeah,
that, self-growth, like this is an opportunity for you to grow and learn about yourself. And I think you can, I mean, if you don't want to do therapy, that's fine. I think journaling can be so powerful,
yeah,
creating art around what you're feeling. Um, yeah, talking to friends or somebody that you value, maybe that's older, that's been through a similar experience, because I feel like we've
for
all
sure.
had the experience of being ghosted, and recognizing that it does get better, it does feel better over time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. Brighter days are ahead. It really, really does.
yeah,
Like there is a light at the end of this tunnel. I know, I've been there.
yeah, me too.
Well, what if somebody's listening and they're not self-harming, but they know somebody who is, or maybe somebody close to them's hurting themselves? How can one help another person who's doing this?
Yeah, such a good question. I mean, I would say not being afraid to talk about it. I would say I care about you, and I want you to know I'm noticing you, and I'm feeling really worried because I do care about you and I want you to get
Yeah,
better. And also, if it's a kid or a teenager, getting help like by a trusted school counselor or a trusted teacher. I don't want kids to feel like they have to hold the secret if it's a dangerous secret like this.
yeah,
And getting that extra help or consulting with somebody that they trust to get the help they need for their friend or loved one.
yeah. I think that's right. And also, there's one thing I just want to point out is you're not, just like you're not responsible for somebody else's behavior, the fact that they ghosted you, you're not responsible for this person who's harming themselves. So, like, if they continue and you've checked in with them, like, that's not your fault.
Totally. Yep. That's the thing too. You have to let go of that, knowing that you can't control what anyone else does. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there other ways that creating art can help with self-harm?
Well, yes, I think anytime you can use like bilateral movements, it's going to be really helpful. So I like would say getting out two colored crayons or pastels or pencils and just doing some bilateral scribbles can feel really good. I will take since we're recording this, I could show you this is one of my art pieces. It's just a scribble and basically you just color in different sections and that can feel so soothing. I think anything that you can do to soothe yourself with art is really great. I personally love watercolors and there's something for me very relaxing about like laying down water and then putting color on top and you can watch it expand. For me, that feels super relaxing. I think for a lot of my clients too. And then even like using clay, again, where you're using that bilateral touch, you're using both hands to create a sculpture. And then again, too, I love clay because it activates the senses. You're smelling it, you're feeling the coolness of the touch. Um, yeah, like I mean, I know stained glass isn't accessible to everyone, but trying something new can feel really good and exciting in a way that doesn't always happen with just art. That like if we've always been coloring, trying something that you've never done before creates that dopamine and makes you
Mm,
kind of come alive in a different way that can be really helpful to healing. So with these kids that were doing stained glass, none of them had ever melted metal before. Like there's a part of it where you're
mm,
soldering metal, and they were so excited about that. So finding an art that feels new and different, and you know what? It doesn't even have to cost money. Like you can go outside and collect a bunch of rocks and create like a beautiful mandala out of rocks. And a mandala, the word literally means sacred circle. So go find leaves and rocks and twigs and make a beautiful sculpture outside on the lawn or in
Mhm.
the dirt. You could even take a stick and create art within the dirt.
Mhm.
So I don't think it necessarily has to cost money to be creative and to kind of find something alternative to do with the arts.
That's such great advice. I love that. So, can you explain a little bit about why our listeners, this is kind of this is a little different kind of question here, but I just want the listeners to know how incredible they are, that they're wonderful, and that they're worthy and
Mm.
important, no matter what they've done or accomplished, or if they're with their ghost or without their ghost. Can you just share a little bit about why everyone is so worthy?
Oh yeah, and I also like to add to that, like you are worthy even if you have scars, even if you've been self-harming for years, you are still
Yeah.
worthy of love and support. Yeah, I mean, I just think we human beings are so incredible and your listeners are so amazing and everyone is unique. And that's kind of what I love about the arts is that I will go to a classroom and I just recently went to a classroom and all the kids created art around this meditation and they were all so different and unique. And I was like, this is why we need everyone here. This is why we need all these perspectives and ideas because of the uniqueness. And I think the arts can really highlight that in that nobody is going to draw the same scribble drawing. They're all going to look different. And finding ways to celebrate parts in you that are unique and special, whether it's art or not, but finding those things that light you up and recognizing your special uniqueness, I think is incredibly important in the healing journey and after being ghosted. And if you have turned to self harm, recognizing, like we were saying earlier, that there are brighter days ahead and things are going to get better. Yeah. And that there's so much goodness in the world. If you focus on that, you'll definitely start to feel better.
Yeah, I agree. Being yourself is one of the greatest gifts you can give to the world. We all are worthy. We're all whole. We're all complete. We're all important. And like, I just want to say that I have harmed myself before, and it it's it's hard for me to talk about, but I have not always had the prettiest, most smoothest, easiest life, right? I've done things that I'm not proud of. And I still have a lot of compassion for myself, and I still nurture kind of my inner child. It's interesting, Jocelyn, you were talking about children, you're talking about teens, young adults, and we have listeners of all ages. And I just think it's so important that everybody honor the child within themselves.
I'm so glad you said that. Actually, I really want to say something to that because that's so important. And what you're saying is, I think a lot of times when we're younger and something bad happens or we get ghosted, that inner critic can get so loud and be so mean to us. And I think that cultivating that compassionate witness is so important. I'm in all of this, like being kind to ourselves, like how we would talk to our child self is incredibly important. Like if we could even see an image of ourselves as a little kid, we would never want to hurt that part of us. Um, yeah, I love that you shared that. And yeah, life is hard and it's like we need a village. We need people to support each other and we need to be kind to ourselves too in all of this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even like the past 2 weeks, I've been dealing with being scammed, and I've kind of been in survival mode. But the whole time I know like that, okay, I'm going to still be nice to myself. I'm going to still try to give myself breaks in between changing all my passwords and my bank account and everything. Like, I am going to honor my body because that's where I am now. I'm not gonna beat myself up for this, even though it was partially my fault for giving information to a scammer, but I'm going to learn from this. And so that's kind of just the self-care that I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, because we've all made mistakes, right? I
right.
think yeah. We all need to
Yeah.
be careful of scammers outside of our bodies and inside of our bodies, like those lies that we tell ourselves. and then the people outside of us that can hurt us. Yeah, to be so careful and mindful. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any experiences about being ghosted that you'd like to share?
Oh, yeah, I definitely have had experiences. One of my best friends from high school, after I've left for college, like just completely stopped responding to me, and it was horrible. And I remember feeling really abandoned and like really depressed for a while because it was like my one really good friend that I thought was going to be there till the end, and
Mm,
she was not. So yeah, it's super sad and super hard.
I'm so sorry you went through that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, well, is there anything else you'd like to share about being ghosted or the act of ghosting or self-harm?
Well, I think you brought up something that I did want to just feed off of, which is that um recognizing like within your experience recently, you're like, okay, a week from now, I'm going to feel different about this. I think that too for people that have experienced self-harming, being ghosted, like recognizing you might not feel incredibly great 5 minutes from the self-harming experience or from the bad experience of being ghosted, but 5 weeks, you might feel really different. 5 months, you're probably going to feel really, really different. And 5 years, you might not even remember. It might be a distant, faded memory. So, kind of giving yourself that perspective, like we talked about so much today, that perspective that time does make things feel better and that you're important and you need to be here and there's a reason you're here. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to share something as well. I know a lot of us turn to social media for solutions after being ghosted. Unfortunately, there's a lot of heartbreak, healing, recovery content out there that is glorifying self harm. So, listeners, just please be mindful of what you're consuming online. So, Jocelyn, how can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, on social media, I'm at Jocelyn underscore art underscore therapy. And then just my full name, jocelynfitzgerald.com is my website, and there's a ton of information on there. Yeah, and I want to share with you like a thing, a document, a piece of art that I created around calming the storm, which is just about like it has those some of the things that we talked about today of like how to like recognize what you're feeling, noticing what's in your body, reminding yourself how you're going to feel 5 weeks from now, and then maybe doing some deep breathing or doing an art exercise. Like there's a map, there's a plan for you if you need it in this document. So yeah, I'd love to share that.
Perfect. And I'll put that in a link on the show notes.
Great.
Thank you for being here. I'm really grateful for your words of wisdom.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for doing this show. It's amazing what you're doing.
Thank you. And listeners, I invite you to follow Coping with Ghosting on social media. You can also join my free and private Facebook support group. And please leave a rating for the show because your feedback will help people find it. And finally, remember when you're ghosted, you have more time to connect with yourself and people who have stellar communication skills. You deserve the best.